Thank you for being here today. And yes, we have a lot of people joining us. So I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. So before we get into
Sure.
before we get into any questions, my first question to you would be why did you want to do this talk today? Why did you agree to do this chat with us today?
Uh, well, on a personal account, Bala's a good friend, and a lot of my voiceovers has been done with Bala as well. So he has seen me as an RJ with FM Rainbow. I have been a chat show host, and he's somebody that really fascinated me with his career as well. And when I saw that you cater to children and your entire aim is to make sure that children are aware there are alternate professions, I thought pitching in here would be a good space to tell children that you don't have to go in the tried and tested path always. Getting out of the comfort zone sometimes helps you discover yourself.
Right.
And if it could help anyone explore something they're blessed with, because I feel our voices are something that we take for granted, don't realize there can be a whole profession around it. So I think that's why I thought it's a good idea to step in to tell kids and parents that there are options beyond the beaten path.
Yes, that is precisely what our aim also is. So we have the section that, as you know, called That Job Rocks. So we talk about some really rocking jobs that can open up a lot of opportunities for kids in the future. So Rashmi, how did you get into voiceovers and using your voice for a career? How did you get into that?
Okay, my career, I don't think it'll be very good advice because mine was not by design. It was more by how life just led me on. And I went in for a workshop because I had taken a career break once my kids came in. And I saw this workshop which called for people who are interested to explore their voices, which was a very different kind of a workshop. And the lineup of speakers for that one day was very interesting. I had no clue that there was a whole industry with voice. And I went for this workshop. So the biggest lesson I learned there is if something touches you as interesting, just go ahead, sign yourself, register there, and see maybe your calling could be there. And the moment you kind of understand that, everything else kind of falls in place. So it was this workshop which intrigued me. The speakers who were coming for the workshop were all people from the voiceover industry, RJs, from stage. And so it was like, okay, if there's so much you can do with your voice, then let me just go see what is open for me. So that's how I entered that space and I realized how much the voice can be used.
So
And that's
after
how my journey began.
so after this workshop, what was the next step? Like, did you immediately start? Was there any other course that you did, or how did that go? How did you get into it professionally? Because considering that it was just a workshop and you tried out of your interest, how did it become a profession?
There are many times you're not aware of your own ability. And in the workshop, since I was the oldest, let me tell you that I was the
Okay.
oldest, but the most curious. Most of them who had come were college students or slightly older than college, but very much younger than me. But I ended up being the one asking the maximum questions. So I was noticed by the persons who organized this. And casually, while talking after the workshop, the guy asked me, would you want to try voiceovers? Because I've noticed you have a very nice way of speaking. And I said, yeah, sure, because that's something I never tried. And he gave me a couple of spaces to go give my voice samples and do voiceovers. And the people in the studio told him that this is a very fresh voice. Maybe we will definitely call her. We need this sample, we'll keep it. I had no clue still what I was doing. And at that point, I said, okay, voiceovers apart, what else can I do? So that's when he told me, go and apply in FM Rainbow, which is under All India Radio. They're looking for RJs. And when I went in there, I think at that point, I was already 34, a mother of two. My children were kind of 5 and 3 years old. And they were growing up, but I wanted to realize what is it that I can do part-time, not full-time. I was in no hurry to get back to work full-time. And when I went into All India Radio, they told me that you are correctly at the cutoff. 35 is cutoff for an RJ. And if you fail this test, then your journey stops. Went in, but before I went in, I did a lot of prep. I listened to radio, understood what is a link, what is it that RJs do, because I knew this was my only attempt. And, before that, I went to a private station and the guy told me straight on my face, I'm not cut out to be an RJ. So surprisingly, I didn't get offended or hurt. I said, okay, maybe he doesn't like my voice. It doesn't suit for his need. But let me see, what is it that takes to be an RJ? And that's how I always believe in everyone's lives, there are peaks and valleys. And the valleys are the time where you prep yourself. A rejection does not mean you are not good enough. A rejection means that you don't fit in that space that you went to. Work on yourself to find out where you can get in. And that work that you do on yourself kind of sharpens you to find that space that is somewhat created for you. So don't stop the moment you're rejected, because one person's rejection should not tell you you're not good.
Absolutely.
And that was my biggest learning. Yeah. And then when I went in for the audition, the rest is history. I got selected.
So tell us about
your done a thorough revision.
So tell us about your first day as an RJ. I mean, it is sort of what I have seen is they have a lot of these instruments and stuff like that. So was it like, oh, what am I doing, or was it? Were you trained for it? How was your first day?
Yeah. When I joined, it's schools at that time, those big tapes, that magnetic tapes.
Right.
They were still working on those. And if the record player for the needle to fall correctly on the groove. And when you're on FM, it's live. So even like a few seconds of pause can seem like a whole big free airtime. There were a lot of learnings because during our orientation, they put us with other RJs. So we see how people work. And I noticed a lot of them took the easy way out, playing CDs, which were available. So the CD player.
Right.
But I noticed that some people whose programs I enjoyed personally did a lot of research with the LP library. And All India Radio has an archive of that. So I decided to go the hard way. And that's how my journey began. The first day of my show, I did at least 5 songs, counting the groove and putting it. And the moment I could do that successfully, I knew that, yes, this is a profession I'm going to really enjoy, because you're on your toes when you're live.
Right.
Yeah, I'll never forget my first day.
So, Rashmi, you talk a lot about how people take their voices for granted and how your voice plays a big role in your personality.
Yeah.
So tell us through your profession. I mean, as somebody who just, considering your journey, where it was not something that you want to do from a young age or whatever, you came into this industry. Tell us what your voice taught you about yourself.
Nupur, before I came into the voice industry, I was also parallelly into facilitation and training in the corporate world.
Right.
So communication and storytelling was something that was part of the profession I had chosen to do. And I loved stories because I was a mother of 2 small kids at that point. And personally, being somebody who loved telling stories, I did a lot of story reading for my children. And I noticed that it automatically helped them open the book and turn the page when I was not there physically next to them. If I was busy with something else, they would pick the book and start turning the page. And I realized there was these audio tapes which had stories and the books that came along. And I noticed my 2-year-old picked up the power of pause. When the child has to turn the page, the audio tape would have a longer pause. That is when the child has to turn the page. Nobody taught him that, but he was able to turn the page. When I noticed that, I realized there's something about voice. There's something more about pause. Because voice is not just talking. Voice is also how you're saying what you're saying and giving that safe space for people and the power of pause. Sometimes you don't have to say anything. Just maintaining that silence and that holy space helps the other person either break down, or that'll be that moment of breakthrough in a conversation. So there are many of us who are uncomfortable with silence, but when you enter the voice space, you understand that silence is equally great conversation. And
That
those are the things that I picked up in the industry.
that is such a very interesting thought. And actually, when we have conversations with people, we just want to keep talking, back and forth. You're very right. That sometimes the pauses are very, very important.
Yeah.
And now let's come to something that's also one of Hoopsters' favorite topics, which is storytelling.
Yeah.
So storytelling, like you said, you used to read stories to your children. My grandmother used to tell me stories. Tell us, just for parents who are watching, as a quick thing, why storytelling is so important for children.
Honestly, I believe that today's kids miss that connect with the grandparents. I grew up in a generation where parents had a lot of time, especially the mothers. I think mine was the last generation where mothers weren't working. And so it was a time where food time was not TV time. It was actually looking at trees, actually adding the crow and the sparrow and all the birds and the vehicles that you can see. I used to enjoy as a little girl when I used to see my neighbor bring her baby out and keep the baby near the gate and make one ball of the rice that is there. And as she's telling the story, she would tell the baby, even if a man is passing or a crow has just flown past, she would include all of them in the story. And the baby would very soon wait for the next thing that comes into the story, because he starts imagining himself how the sequence goes. And storytelling that way, I think, has come down generations. Before school started, a lot of our folklore has come by just stories, through stories. If you go back into all those caves, everything was visually represented, and all of them are stories. And
Right.
people started with visual art, then created sound, then created words, and then we started communication with words. But communication through stories always existed. And that is what I feel this generation and my kids' generation was missing out. There were a few parents like me who consciously took a break in the career. And I noticed that stories were a good way to keep the child off the TV and start talking. Kids speak faster when you tell them stories because they now want to repeat what you're telling them. It's like putting on a nursery rhyme, repetition. They don't know the meaning, but before they know the meaning, they know the rhyme by heart.
Right.
And that is exactly what stories do. And when you tell a story, you also help the child imagine. Because when you're telling a story, you're not going to say, there was a forest. In the forest, there were a lot of animals. Or animals like the lion were the king of the forest and the lion with his family. You're not going to tell it like that, right? To a little child, you're not reading, you're telling a story. And storytelling is, even now, I'm sure if you are somebody who had your grandmother telling you stories, you have favorite stories, not for the way it's written, but for the way it has been told to you.
Yes.
So the storyteller plays a very important role. When you're starting a story and you're going to say, okay, there was this forest, lot of green trees and birds making all these tweet, 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 tweet little noise. Everybody was happy. The sky was blue, the leaves were green, and there were pink flowers. So you bring in so much of visual to the child. And there comes a black crow, because you can see a crow at that time. And this crow came and sat on that green tree there, which has those pink flowers hanging and the yellow flowers next to it. So here the child is actually creating a story, creating a visual, and creating a scenery. And there's nothing like imagination that you're helping the child build. And that way, very soon, the child starts creating his or her own story. And that's how imagination builds, creativity builds. And that's why storytelling. And a lot of our culture has come down through stories. We don't know why we do so many things, but we know our grandmothers did it, and so we
Yeah,
are doing it.
true.
When you ask the why, that's when there's a story behind it. But
Yeah.
today, there are no storytellers to tell us the why.
Yes, agreed, agreed. So, if, I mean, even if you probably ask me to sit down and tell somebody a story, it'll take me a while to get. But with my grandmother or like her sisters, it was so natural. They were so good.
Yeah.
Tell me a story. Okay, it was very easy for them.
This is where I remember a story. There was this guy who would notice that his wife, every time she would cook a full meat, a turkey, she would cut the two sides of it and keep it in the oven. And his heart would burn because it's pretty expensive, but she'd cut two big chunks and put it in. So one day he asked her, "Why are you cutting that and putting it in like that?" So she said, "I don't know. My mother used to do it." Luckily for him, his mother-in-law was alive. So when they met up at a family get-together, he saw his mother-in-law do the same thing and put the turkey in. So he said, "Mom, why do you do this?" She said, "I don't know. My mother used to do this." And he was like, "Oh my God, they just do it because the previous generation did." And he was really fortunate because the grandmother-in-law was alive and they were all to meet for Christmas. So that Christmas, when lunch was being cooked, he went into the kitchen and he noticed the grandmother cutting the sides of the turkey and putting it in. So he says, "Grandmom, why do you cut the sides of the turkey and put it in?" So she said, "Son, can't you see my oven is small?" So sometimes it
Right.
is a tradition that people don't ask why for, but the why would be more meaningful in whatever you do. So that's
Absolutely.
where all of these communications and stories come into play.
That's interesting. Yes, communication, I think, is something that we need to really, really work on, especially today. Very strangely, we have more means of communication, but lesser communication, which is,
Exactly.
very, very
Yeah.
strange. So, Rashmi, you work a lot with using your voice to sort of empower yourself, to sort of remove self doubt. And tell us, uh, how have you discovered yourself through your voice? Have there been any instances that you can think of where your voice played an important role in helping you understand the person that you are?
Uh, More than understanding me as a person, there are a lot of instances which happened more as a radio person, where the person cannot see me. And 2004, it was more Facebook, no Instagram at that point of time. And I had opted out of being on Facebook. So I didn't like being there just for a Facebook smile. The whole thing put me off when somebody said, when we were together for a wedding, and one of our RJ groups and one of my friends was like, "Come, come, come, let's take a Facebook picture." It's like, what is a Facebook picture? So she's like, "No, all of us should be smiling in this picture." And somehow that didn't, somewhere it told me no. And I stepped out of Facebook. But I realized a lot of people were coming onto the show and being part of the conversation because of what I was telling them and how I was telling what I was saying. I was very touched when a year after we had started a new program, on one particular day, there was a call. And when I answered, he said, "Ma'am, my name is Vishwa." I said, "Yeah, Vishwa." He said, "Thank you so much, ma'am. You changed my life." I said, "Really? How? What did I do?" So he was like, "Ma'am, exactly a year ago, you had done this show when it started. And I'm so happy you're on air today, because in All India Radio, it's not the same RJ every day. It's the shows are same, but RJs change." And he said, "I'm so happy you're on air today because today is exactly 1 year. And I had tuned into your show and you spoke about the bumblebee. You told us that, thank God, the bumblebee does not know that aerodynamically it cannot move the way it does. Scientists, I had read an article which said that key facts, interesting facts about bumblebees, is that bumblebees aerodynamically cannot move the way they do because of their wingspan and their body size. And second, if bumblebees go extinct, humans will not survive for long. And that hit me. And I said, the world around you is going to say so many things about you. Don't take that feedback. Let's take the example of the bumblebee, and I'd done a show around the bumblebee. I liked it, so I did it. And I spoke from my heart because that's what it touched me with. And when he told me 1 year later that that stayed with me, ma'am, because at that point I had completed my engineering and I had no clue. I was rejected at work. I didn't know what to do with myself. And as you were talking, without my knowledge, I'd drawn a bumblebee. And I was, when I finished it, I really liked what came out. And I went in and I joined a course of graphic art. And today, 1 year later, I'm a graphic artist leading a team and I'm enjoying my work. Thank you so much. I don't know this guy. I've not seen him. But I realized the way I spoke, what I said, touched him somewhere. And for me, that was like huge feedback. And beyond that, in the trainings that I was doing, when I was talking to people, there were a lot of people coming back to me and saying, you know, we love the way you are so warm when you talk. You just understand what exactly we want. So it was more the feedback that people were giving me that made me aware that I was not trying to put on anything, but it's just that this voice was reaching out to people, whether they could see me or they could not see me. And that for me gave me a clear understanding that there's a huge, huge impact on not what you say, but how you say it.
Yes.
And that is the tone. And that's where my journey began. And how I took it further was when the pandemic struck. Last March, a lot of programs that were confirmed all got cancelled because everyone took a back step. Nobody knew what to do. And at that point, I was speaking to a lot of women. Okay, now I train women and coach women in the senior leadership positions. And I was very surprised when a lot of them had so much of self-doubt. And as women, I have noticed that we need to be 99% sure. Only then we'll raise our hand to go out to do a task.
Right.
And how do people pick that up? In that quiver in our voice. Even if the world says you are good, we are like, do you think so? I don't think I have the certification for it. I think I need to get that certification and then I'll be good at it. And that self-doubt needed to be dusted. And I noticed that most of it was in their voice. They would never voice out their opinion. If an opinion given by them is rejected, they take it as personal rejection. And so I realized women leaders needed to be worked with because there was a lot of stress on them mentally as well, since the home front, the child school, everything became part of their everyday routine. And what they did not have to mind because no house help, they had to manage a lot. And it started showing that weariness started showing. And you know what? In today's, now, all of us are here on this screen. 3 of us are looking into each other. The other 3 that we see are names. And so many others are just names. We can't see them, right? If they're still logged in, there has to be something for them. So it is your voice that needs to be cultured, that needs to become aware, connected, and that's when people stay and start listening to you. And that became the need. And that's how this program called Vani, which is actually virtual articulation narrating instrument. And Vani in Sanskrit is voice. So that's where the Indian connection with the name came in, but it's an acronym for this, where in your virtual articulation, this instrument, which is unique to each one of us, is how we connect to the world outside. And that's where the whole thing was born. Putting all the learnings that I have, because I do a lot of emceeing as well. In the last 7 years, I've been emceeing a lot of live concerts in Bangalore and doing them with renowned artists like Kabir Bedi and other artists like Asha Bhosle. Sharing space with them on stage has taught me a lot about how to handle yourself and how to speak what you want to say very assertively.
Right.
A whole list of people that I had the privilege of sharing the stage with have taught me in every interaction how to handle yourself and especially your voice. And it's all very small exercises, you know. It doesn't take long time. It's just about the awareness of how to use it. That's all it is.
So there's what you say is very interesting. It's not what you say, but how you say it. The reason I say this is a lot of times, even people that I have interacted with, I've heard this thing coming out very often. Maybe it's the tone of my voice, but that's not what I meant to say. It happens a lot. They just seem rude, but they don't mean badly. You know, uh, Sometimes I feel that people need to work on that. It is an important thing to work on, where you need to be aware of how you're talking to people, especially if you're, like you said, leadership front, or if you're in a sales front, or if you're managing any interpersonal relationship for that matter, even at home. you know so how does one become aware of that? People are aware of this. They're like, oh, just the tone of my voice. But how do they change that? Because they think that this is what I'm born with, and this is how it's going to be. People need to accept it. So how do we change that about ourselves if there is a problem?
If you've got feedback that it is the tone of your voice, or you come across as very aggressive, women are never seen as confident. They're only seen as aggressive.
Correct.
Okay. That is something that a lot of women leaders have a problem accepting. I was just stating the fact as it is. Why are they calling me aggressive? Why can't they just see that I'm stating it as is? And the whole problem lies in how you see yourself. It's not with the world outside. It's with you. And you start believing what they say. There's a lot, when you're sarcastic. Okay. Suppose now somebody comes to you and asks you, shows you a picture and says, Nupur, how do you think this is? And you don't like it. So you say, oh, awesome. What do you think that person picks up?
The tone.
Awesome.
Yeah, but the tone, your face, your expressions, non-verbal communication.
Yeah. Yes. So in the virtual connects that we have today, people cannot see your entire body language. And if their cameras are off and they're speaking, you can't even see their face. So what are they picking up and what are you hearing is how they're saying what they're saying. So it is very important. Now, suppose you want to say that it's good, but there's scope for improvement. All that you can do is just say, nice for a first attempt. Maybe you should do one more. It will be way better than this, right? You can work little on this area, and that's it. That's what the person wants, feedback on what he or she did. But if you are going to be sarcastic, and the sad part is, when you're not visible, sarcasm fails because they can't pick it up.
Right.
So you can never be sarcastic on an email because you're not reading the email, they're reading the email. Right. So you have to be very wise in knowing where to use what with your voice. And this again is something where, if you notice, receptionists are trained a lot to have a smile on their face while they're talking, right? It's a difficult job. It's not as cushy as people think it to be, because they have to sit the whole day and say, hello, so-and-so, good evening. Hope you're having a hug. May I help you? They must sound like they want to help. They can't sound rude and ask you, how may I help you? So it's such a tough job to have that smile on. And when we are trained as RJs, we are told your smile should be visible to the listener, because the listener is doing other things and also listening to you. Maybe he or she is driving and listening to you. They must have had a horrible day and they're tuning into a show. They can't listen to somebody who's already irritated before they even tune in the radio, right? So when you come in, always remember, when you start your show, keep that smile on. It should be visible. Now, I didn't understand a word of what that meant till I actually went on air. I went on air and I started the show that particular day. We are normally expected to be half hour before time. And that particular day, I ended up being like few minutes before the show began. So in spite of my Kannada RJ, who was there before me, offering to sit there for some time and start the show, I said, no, you go. It's okay. You were there already for 2 hours. And I started. So once the signature tune was on and I began, the first thing I said is, good evening, you're tuned into 101.3 FM Rainbow with me, Rashmi Shetty, topic after the song. Because that's all I could say at one breath before I could take a deep breath, okay? No smile, nothing. It was just an opening. And the first message that came to me within the first 5 seconds was, how come, Rashmi, you're not smiling today? And that's when I understood what the training was. When they said that your smile should be visible to your listener.
Right.
And, like, okay, take your own example. Suppose you're caught up in something, okay? You're really completely focused on doing the job and your mobile starts ringing. It's your very, very good friend. So you pick up the phone and you say, yeah, tell me. Does she tell you immediately? What is her first question? Everything okay, Nupur?
Yes.
Should we speak later? Because normally that's not what you would say. You'd say, hi, how are you? And stuff like that, right? She's not trained, but she knows that that tone in your voice tells her that you are not yourself, how you would normally react. There's so much in our voice, and we
Absolutely.
don't even realize this
Yeah.
half the time.
Yeah, that is true. I think when
And
we talk,
look at your how you speak to children. How do you speak to children? Do you speak to children like how you speak to adults?
absolutely not.
Do you speak to your pets like how you speak to your adults?
Definitely
The
not.
pet, whether the pet understands or not, your pitch is
Definitely.
way high,
Yeah,
but your tone is full of affection,
yeah,
right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Who taught you all that? It's just nature's way of telling you how to connect. So our voice knows it. It's just that
Right.
we are not aware.
Correct. So when we're looking at voices, we always look at high pitch, low pitch, bassy, husky. But there's so much more to it, like how your voice sounds. You can have a really shrill voice but still sound present.
Yes.
For example,
Yeah. Yes.
So tell us this self-doubt with your voice. This program for me is very, very interesting because it's such a simple thing that you carry with you, your voice. It's with you all the time and it's yours to use the way you want to. So tell us how you eliminate this self-doubt, especially when you're talking about women in a high position, a leadership position. Self-doubt should not be a part of your career at all. How do you use the voice to teach them that?
So first and foremost, what the voice conveys is so many emotions. Okay, there is this acronym with voice that I had come up with, which I will share with you now. If you take VOICE, voice itself, okay, V stands for volume. Okay, now we have three kinds of voice: a low voice, a middle voice, and a high voice. Invariably, most of us are speaking from the middle voice to the high voice. But when we are going into warmth, we speak from the middle voice to the lower voice. When you're trying to be warm to a child, a little child, how do you speak? You don't say, come here, baby, right? You say, come here, sweetheart, come here, come here. Or you're calling your dog. Automatically what happens? Your voice lowers its volume. And most of us don't realize that when we speak and we want to be assertive, is how we want to be, but we come across as shrill because we are speaking from middle to high when we want to be loud in the way we are telling our point across. You don't have to increase your volume. There are many other features of voice you can work around. So the next is the oscillation. O stands for oscillation. Oscillation is like the best metaphor that I can think of is the ECG machine. Now, when you see the ECG machine, and all of us have seen climax of Indian films. That's where the focus is towards the end, right? When the machine goes up and down, up and down, up and down, the person is alive. So the more modulations and oscillations your voice has, the more the voice is alive. The moment the ECG machine shows key, which is one straight line, there's no life. And that's where it reflects in our life as well. So when you speak on a monotone, as a speaker also, you're boring. And for the other, there are some people, so sometimes you start realizing this person is speaking a lot of sense, but why am I not able to focus? Why is he sounding boring? Why is he coming across as boring? That's because somewhere they have chosen one monotone and there's no oscillation, because sound is wave, right? It's not a straight line. And the moment you understand that, when you're talking to somebody, you love what you're doing, automatically there is a huge oscillation in your voice. You're very upset. It's like, no, I don't think I can talk to you, right? So how did you pick it all up? Nobody told you that. It's very natural that we have it in us. That's why sound is represented as a wave. And then comes I. I is inflection or the throw of your voice. Okay. Most of us speak from our throat.
Right.
What is hugely suggested is speaking from your stomach, the nabi, the belly button area. Okay. So one exercise that will really help you speak from there, because when you speak from there, what happens is you can speak longer sentences without running short of breath.
Right.
Okay. And do it consciously initially and then make it a habit, so much so that it becomes an unconscious part of yours. And this again is a tip that one of the actors called Kabir Bedi, who has a great voice. He's almost in his late 70s and does a lot of voiceovers even now. And he's got a very deep baritone when he speaks. Got very, very good voice. So, but he's also a chain smoker. And when I noticed that he would smoke so much, but his voice is so good, I asked him that, what do you do, Mr. Bedi, to make sure that your voice hasn't lost its sheen in spite of you smoking like a chimney? So he said, there's one exercise that I do, and I vouch for that exercise because I do it almost every day. And that exercise is a very simple one, which anybody can do. It's just articulation of oo, okay. So when it's om, that oo, that you do. And how do you do that? You start with
Okay.
And the longer you can hold the you will start seeing the pull in the core of your stomach.
Right.
And you're doing it right. Okay, initially it'll be tough, but start doing it every day. And this doesn't take much time. And the more you start doing it, the more you start realizing, there are times when you're very upset, you're very angry, and your throat feels dry, right? There's nothing which comes out. Or you're shocked with a sad news or a sudden news that has come to you, and this entire space just dries up, right? But if you end up speaking from your navi, from your belly area, from the diaphragm, you'll start noticing that that doesn't happen. Because this is where your vocal cords are. The sound is reflected here. Okay, and the throw needs to come from deeper down. And that's when your voice becomes really powerful. So whether you're speaking softly or you're speaking really loudly, it should come from the core. And that's when you are effective. So V for volume, O for oscillation, I for inflection, C is clarity. Many of us don't realize that we mumble and jumble a lot of words and swallow towards the end of sentences. So people don't understand what you said or why you said what you said, because the last part of your sentence, and that's a training that we had as little kids, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. So the star, the R, all that goes tuck, 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 tuck. So it is taught to us that at the end of the sentence, you go down. The sound goes down like that. Don't do that. Make sure there is clarity in every word that you say. And how do you build that clarity? Very exaggeratedly, you start opening your mouth and say the bubbles, because the bubbles are where your mouth is coordinated, your lips move, right? B, C, D, it's the same. But A, E, I, O, U is where there's a whole lot of happening here. So even just doing that exercise, if you have little children, nothing like it. Sit and do this exercise with them. It'll be a game for them, but it's a huge exercise for you. And you start off with these exaggerated ways of saying these vowels, and then it starts becoming a part of your clarity in speech. And E stands for emotions. People pick up whether you're happy or sad in the way you speak. And that's how emotions are conveyed with a voice. There are times when people are sharing something And we say, I understand, but I feel that's a very wrong statement to put at that point because you don't understand what they're going through. It's something that they are going through, right? So even if you are like, they get it that you understand, right? Yeah, sure. That's it. Or you take their hand and you hold their hand. That's enough. Sometimes I understand seems so redundant, unnecessary. So, and when you're saying like the forest was very happy because of all the animals getting all that they want to eat, to the sad jackal didn't know what. So, where are the emotions in the words that you are using? And that's where just if you just take voice itself, there's so much in it that if you start working around it, coming across as assertive, coming across as aggressive, coming across as passive, and coming across as one with self-doubts and coming across as somebody as confident is very easy for the person who's listening to you to pick it up.
Right.
And that's where this plays such a big role. And that's why, I do this program with women one-on-one. I don't do it generic group because you have a absolutely different voice than mine, Nupur.
Right.
And your need and ask need not be what is mine, or Padma's could be completely different. And
Right.
we cannot have the same instructions. So this
Right.
is where working around the voice, each one who's uniquely gifted with whatever nature has ordained you with, is the gift that you have to use. And that's what I believe.
Absolutely. There are two emotions that usually sort of overlap with each other, especially when we're talking about careers, we're talking about people who are communicating well. Even teachers, parents, us, when we're talking to friends. Assertive, aggressive. These are two things that tend to overlap a lot. So since I love the way you use your voice. So if you can, give us an instance and tell us, listen, this is when you're assertive and this is when you could get aggressive. Can you give us an example?
Okay. How you work on assertive is, suppose there is a meeting, okay, and they have asked you for your opinion, and you want to put it across very straight that you, as a leader, think that this person should not be given that particular task. Okay, a past experience has shown that this person has not lived up to expectations. Let's assume that Geeta is talking about Rita. Okay, let's not bring in a guy here. Let's keep in two women. And invariably, that's another big problem because women are seen as the ones who pull other women down and don't see as helping other women grow as well. Okay, so now Geeta has seen that Rita did not perform the last time. She wants to be assertive about Rita's performance, but also wants to say that maybe we should give Rita a chance this time. Okay, but is aware completely. She believes Rita can do it. It was just that last time there was something else that came in. So she's vouching for Rita. That's the seed. While the rest are like, she didn't perform. Geeta knows it, but she wants to support Rita this time. So assertively, what she can say is, I still believe, I heard all of you, I still believe that Rita this time can definitely perform. I did speak to her before we came in here. She had a personal issue, which is now handled. So I'm sure we can go ahead and give. Okay. The same thing if she wants to recommend Rita, and she knows the whole lot of them are against Rita. But this time, aggressively, how she can say it is, I know all of you are against Rita. There could be many reasons. I spoke to her just now, and I know it. I know it. Therefore, I think she can do it. Okay, there is no room for any conversation here. While in the first assertive conversation, there are a lot of egos that come into play when you are doing this game of assertive to aggressive.
Right.
And the ego state that you operate from when you're being assertive is, I'm okay, you're okay. We are on even game playing field here. But when you're aggressive, it's I am okay, you're not. So there's more sounding of I that comes up when
Right.
you're being aggressive. In assertive, there is an I, but it's a softer I. And there is an I that is willing to listen. But in aggressive, the I is not willing to listen. The I in assertive is more, I take responsibility. The I in aggressive is, I am saying so. And that line is somewhere where many people misunderstand assertion to aggression. And
Right.
that's where the tonal part can be worked with. You can say the same thing. You
Right.
can say the same thing, but all you need to work on is that tone aspect. And
Right.
that's what needs to be worked on. That's it. It's that simple.
As parents and as educators or anybody who is a stakeholder in a child's life, what can we do to help them use their communication, their voice better? Because I think in the future, considering that we're looking at a lot of artificial intelligence, we're looking at these different things coming in, what will matter most is how we handle our interpersonal relationships.
Yes.
So how can we train our children to speak well, to use their voice well, and put out their opinions better as they grow up?
Yeah. Here, I think parenting is a big responsibility because children don't listen to you, children watch you. And if your children are turning out exactly like how you want them to, you've done a good job as a parent. You can tell your child, there are so many parents I have met. They tell their children, when I'm talking to you, look at me. Right? What are you telling the child? Give me eye contact when I'm talking to you. And this is one of the first lessons that we teach our children when they start replying or speaking some kind of small words. We look at them and we start saying. But as we get busy with our lives and we are reading the paper or working on the laptop or on our mobile phones, and the child is saying something to us, after a point, we stop looking at them and we are busy with all the other things that are taking our attention away. The child stops speaking. A parent who picks that up and turns and says, okay, why did you stop? And the child is like, no, you were not looking at me. The communication channel is still open. But you haven't even realized the child has stopped speaking and sharing, then you've lost the channel. Because today, somewhere I feel parents play a big role and they have to get off whatever these gadgets they use. It's still artificial intelligence, it's not real.
Absolutely.
And we are blessed with the real ones. And children are endowed with a lot of them. Allow them to explore that. Because the other day, I remember I was in a clinic a few months ago, much before the pandemic struck. And I was waiting there for the doctor. And a lot of us were waiting. And I saw this mother with a girl who was maybe she was just about able to sit on a chair independently, okay? And this girl is looking at everybody around. A child who is about maybe a year plus is not interested in gadgets still. And she's more fascinated with the world around her and what is happening, the people, because everything is a miracle for her. And she just wants to absorb all that is happening in her surrounding. The mother had her purse and she was bugged about something. She put her hand in and she picked her phone and she was busy on something. The child looked at all of us and everyone who was free waved out to the child. And at that point, she tapped her mother and she couldn't even speak. She tapped her mother. The mother put her hand into the purse and took out another phone and gave it to the child. Now the child looked at the phone very briefly, but then was not interested in the phone. The child wanted something else to happen where the child wanted communication. And that's where I feel if parents can let go, they cannot blame gadgets today because somewhere we gave it to them. Before the child knew a gadget, who introduced them to it? Absolutely. It's easier plopping them in front of the television or the iPad and shoving food into their mouth so they don't even know what they're eating.
Right.
So I think that angle we should alter. And automatically you'll tap into real intelligence and won't have to depend on artificial ones.
So, absolutely. This is something that we also talk a lot about, a child never picks up a phone on his own. They may be curious, but it's only for a brief, like you said, like very brief. Children are more physical. They want to touch, they want to feel. So, so Rashmi, we are almost at the end of our interview. So one very important question that I want to ask you is, since you're speaking about voiceovers and a career using your voice as well, if there is some child or a parent or someone who's watching who has shown interest in this career, what are the channels available to them and how do they get started?
As far for the child, is it?
For the child who has shown interest, suppose the child says, "Ma, I want to become an RJ, or I want to become like I want to do voiceovers." What are the channels available?
No, more than the channels available, I think the parents should try and regulate that interest, because sometimes it's just a fascination for a short period of time, and then the child outgrows that and looks at something else. But whether you're an RJ or whatever you're doing, whichever profession you're going to go to, you're going to communicate. So working with the voice is something which I feel every parent should get into to help their children on that skill of communication. So first, fascinate the child with the voice world. Okay? Record the child say something and get the child to listen and say, okay, what can be better here? Let the parent listen to it. Let the parent also play that game. Let the parent record his or her voice and compare with the child and take feedback from the child. Because I remember there was this session that I did with presentation, and we were talking about voice and storytelling and all that. And there was this guy who raised his hand and said, I have a 3-year-old. I'm going to go today and get feedback. Because I say, if you have 3 to 5-year-olds, you have life coaches at home. Don't waste your time going out, because they're downright frank and give you feedback straight away.
True.
So he said, I have a 3-year-old. I'll come back tomorrow and tell you how the storytelling session went. And the next day, he was the first one to come into the session. And I was like, okay, Prashant, how did it go? And he was like, I'm so disappointed. I said, why? What happened? He's like, after listening to all that tips that you gave, I went home and I told my daughter, Beta, get your favorite storybook. Papa's going to read it today. And Beta was super thrilled. She went and picked her favorite storybook because Mama does story reading every day. And today Papa is free. So she brought her storybook and he was flipping through the page. And she said, Papa, can I sit on your lap, please? And he was like, ha, aja. And picture perfect. Baby on Papa's lap and book in front of both of them. Reading started. And he was focusing on every aspect he learned in the session. And he started reading the story. Midway through the story, the child just slipped down from his lap, turned, looked at him, pulled the book away, and she was like, Papa, aapko padhna nahi aata? And he was like, so what do you think? That was the first question, that I asked the rest in the session. So what did you think Prashant did not do? And the majority answer was, he read it technically right, but he did not connect to the story. Because for the child, it's not all the technical aspects. The child loves the way a story is read or told because of the teller.
Right.
And for her, the fascination was, Papa is going to read it today, so we're going to have a different voice modulation. We're going to have a different connect to this favorite story of mine. So that is important. That is very important. Get into this game with your children. Your children will make you better storytellers. Get into that mode to get in touch with that storyteller within who's waiting to connect to the world outside. In the process of helping your child find his or her storyteller, you will definitely find your storyteller. And I think that voice going out will be what the world needs a lot. Especially these times, we need more stories. Way to put your voices. And the end result obviously will be that the child will understand what communication is all about. Because at the end, I think all relationships are based on beautiful stories that connect us. We are all people who are great storytellers, and we enjoy listening to great stories because that's what connects us. And human relationships are all stories.
Yes, certainly. So, yeah, I think that's what, differentiates a good speaker from a bad one, or a good leader from a bad one, how well they're able to keep them and tell them stories. Even our teachers, we remember some teachers who being really fun because they were so engaging, right? Now,
Yes, yes.
said, what are the career options available to me if I in the voice industry? What are the different options that I have?
Okay. Okay, as a voice industry artist, one is voiceovers. And in voiceovers, broadly, there can be the typical ones which are documentaries, and the other ones which are corporate voiceovers based on the film. The voice that runs behind that film is called a voiceover. So, broadly, these are two categories that you can try on, because when you're reading for a documentary, it's a different style of reading, it's a narration. When you're doing a corporate voiceover, it's a very different stylized way of speaking that they require for the video that they're playing. The other thing is definitely being an RJ. Another part of voice industry is where you can do public speaking, emceeing, connect to your audience live, podcasting. That is something which is huge now, especially in India. Podcasting became huge since the pandemic struck. I too am a podcaster now. And podcasting is a very powerful medium because it's online. So you never know who's going to listen to that story. And once content goes online, it's available for anybody.
Hmm.
So I think one thing parents and children should be aware of is the footprint that you leave online. Make it meaningful and powerful because it remains there for quite some time. And later, even if you want to deny it, it's proof right there. So be very careful of the footprint that you leave online. Another space is audiobooks. Okay, there are a lot of audiobooks now. There is a computer generated voice which reads most of the bestsellers, but then that's also a medium where people can use a lot of their voice. Audiobooks, because a lot of people are taking to audiobooks because they're so tired of video now, especially since the last 1 year. Audio medium has come back. And so audiobooks are really gaining popularity. So you can try in that space. You can put out your own books as in the audiobook format as well, which is interesting. And another space is, which was always there, was textbook reading for the blind, the visually challenged. A lot of them are really thankful to those who give their voice for textbooks. And that is a space that is forever open. Because for children who have the visual handicap, for them, they cannot read, and therefore, if somebody reads that lesson and take some time doing it, this is where they can really help, not only honing their skill, but in the process help somebody else do the study part of it. These are broadly some of the areas that anyone can venture into using voice.
Yes, so we got all. This is a lot of information. When we talk about voice, I can only think of two things like voiceovers for advertisements and maybe documentaries and RJ. RJ, that's all I can think of. So getting this broad, like this is a lot of information, which is great for children and parents who are maybe thinking about what can they do, how can they use communication,
Yeah.
which is wonderful. Tell us, Rashmi, why is it important for us to create awareness about alternate jobs? Like Hoopsters today, we're doing that job rocks. Um, why is something like this important today?
One is because today's children have a huge exposure that the previous generation did not. The world literally has become a global village because every one of us is connected globally now. And therefore, trying on the tried and tested path no more works. It's not that, especially with the voice, why I think this works is you can do any other profession and still be a voice professional. And you can keep this as a hobby and still have something else. You can be a part-time RJ and still be something else. The voice allows you to play. You can be a professional audiobook reader and still have some other profession. So with the voice industry, there is so much of flexibility, especially, and that can give you a whole idea of what all are available.
Right.
And once you get in there and you kind of put a deep footprint, it makes it a lot more easy. for you to get noticed, because the market out there is pretty small. And then it is only by word of mouth and network, like everything else. So if you're talking voice per se as an alternative career, it doesn't have to be at the cost of something else. It can be along with it, and maybe you'll find joy in it, and that at one point you can leave the profession you're not seeing a lot in and move into a space where you can just be creative. If you're a creatively bent person, having this option of looking at a different direction can bring out something which can be a whole new zone that nobody even thought of. Like if I look at my own self, when I set off when I was 20, I had no clue that at 50, I'll be sitting here and telling people that voice industry is the place you should be. So the 30-year journey has been splendid for me. And having tried so many different things, and the voice industry opened up that many more avenues. So keeping your options open always helps. If you don't know, that's fine. Your children can look online now, and having an alternate career always helps. Maybe that'll be your calling at the end of the day.
So I'm down to my last question, which is today's show is called Listen to Your Own Voice. That is the title we chose for this show. Tell us why it's important and give us one, of course, spoken about why it's important, but some like a summary of things for people to listen to, why it's important, and your word of advice to people on using their voice better.
Okay. There are some basic do's and don'ts, which is very important to the voice. One is don't shout and never speak in whispers. Both are bad for your voice. So make sure you're using your voice well, especially now with the weather changing, raining suddenly and getting too hot at times. The first place where you get that irritation is your throat. So don't immediately swallow menthol and halls and all those drops, which give you instant relief. Because after that, when you drink water, you feel extremely wonderful and hydrated. Because what these drops do, all these menthol drops, is they dry up your vocal cords, and therefore you don't cough. When you're hydrated, it feels that much more good. So what is recommended is don't have extreme temperatures of food also. Make sure you're in lukewarm room temperature or normal room temperature. Take care of this, because this is where infection hits the first.
Right.
Okay, the first point of connect with the outside world is your voice. And therefore, taking care of it is somewhere an indicator, because if you take care of that cold, when it just sets in, it's your first antibodies fighting the infection, right? So right from there starts the care that needs to be something that everybody should be aware of. And from there starts this gratitude journey that everyone who's blessed with a voice is special. And I believe very firmly that when you know that you are special and unique, you start believing that you are a masterpiece yourself. You stop looking outside for comparison and start looking inside to just better yourself from the last performance. And the moment you start doing that, you know you are connected, because listen to your voice is all about the person within with whom you need to establish the biggest bond. And that person within you is your gut, which tells you what to do right and wrong. Right? When you are actually doing an act, there's some thought in you which says, no, don't do this. Or another thought in you, just try, it's okay.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're trying to get out of your comfort zone, there could be that safety net you put for yourself. But if you want to just try it, just try it. Because one big lesson I have taken from life is we regret only that which we did not do. And every one of those acts we did not do will be adding to that list. So when you look back in life, never have that regret that, oh, I wish I did it. Okay, do it whenever you want to do it. And if you fail, good. You shouldn't even consider it a failure. You learn from it, move forward. If you do well, great. try some more, get out of that comfort zone, and just keep pushing yourself, because the competition is not outside. Just like your happiness and joy is not outside, it's how well you're connected with yourself inside. So I think that would be the thing that I use in my life, and that's what I would like to leave with.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was such a very important message in today's world. There's a lot of validation that we seek
Yeah.
in the world of social media. Everything is about validation. So the day we realize that we need to talk to ourselves more, listen to ourselves more, and sort of believe in ourselves more, I think that's where we are one.
Yes, yes, because nobody can do anything
Yes.
as uniquely as you do.
Totally, completely agree with you on that. And thank you so much, Rashmi. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you all for staying back and listening to our talk. If you want to watch it again, it will be on our YouTube channel called Hoopex TV. There are a lot of other chats, interesting conversations that you've had that you can go through as well. And of course, we're on Facebook Live right now. So if you want to share it, please do. Thank you so much, Rashmi. I
Thank you,
hope to talk
Nupur.
to you again soon.
Such a pleasure and honor. Thank you so much. It was lovely.
My pleasure too. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.